Hopefully, you said that the volcanoes are in lines, because we see lines here, and those lines are near the edge of continents, because that's what we see along these. And then you can add in that there are some in the middle of the ocean. And that is actually true of earthquakes even more so. Earthquakes over here, let's do pink. They are definitely near the edge of continents. Going all the way around this continent. And they are also really, there's a nice line here right in the middle of the ocean. This line is right in the middle of an ocean. This line goes right through the middle of an ocean, middle of an ocean, middle of an ocean. So volcanoes and earthquakes tend to be near the edge of continents in lines and also in the middle of the ocean. Let's learn a little bit more about why that is. And that's something that we can't see with our eyes very easily, but that scientists now know is true. And that is that our Earth, the crust, is the hard part on the outside. It isn't one big piece of rock. It is broken up into these pieces. There's like cracks, like a cut through the earth, all these different cracks. And these cracks break it into different pieces, sort of the same way that a puzzle is broken into pieces. Here's a picture of a hummingbird puzzle, and the puzzle is broken into pieces. Now, there's not any extra space. Those pieces fit together perfectly, and that is true of our Earth as well. There's not a lot of space in between these different pieces. Those pieces fit together perfectly like a puzzle, but there is a crack there, the same way there is in a puzzle. So there's a little like break in the hard solid rock of the crust at these locations. And as you might expect, that little crack can cause things to happen. And so, a couple of vocabulary words for you. First vocabulary word is this word plate. Each of these pieces is called a plate. So you can see African plate, Eurasian plate, North American plate, Australian plate. A lot of them are named for the continents that are on them. Some of them are in the ocean, so they aren't named after a continent, like Nazca plate. This one's named after the ocean it's in, Pacific plate. But each of those pieces, like the piece of the puzzle, is called a plate. We call the little lines in between them the cracks, or sometimes people call them the boundaries or the edges of the plates. And you'll see all of those. One of the things that's interesting is that we find out, if we look over time, that these plates, we find out that volcanoes and earthquakes actually happen right on the edges of these plates. So a lot of the places where we were seeing volcanoes and earthquakes happen were the edges of plates. For instance, we saw right along North America, right along California, that is an edge of a plate. We saw right along South America, that is an edge of a plate. We saw right around Asia, that is an edge of a plate. We saw right down the middle of the ocean, that is the edge of a plate. So we find out that these are not randomly distributed earthquakes and volcanoes. They happen just on these lines because those are the cracks in the edge of the place. Kind of makes sense that where there's a crack, magma might be able to come up and form a volcano, right? It might come up right in between that crack, kind of like something might leak out of a crack in a bowl. Also, it might make sense that where there's a crack, the edges might rub together, and that's actually what forms earthquakes, is that rubbing, and it makes things shake a little bit right near the cracks, because that's where the crust is the weakest, and so it's going to end up shaking where it's the weakest. And so the main point here is that volcanoes and earthquakes don't happen all over. They don't happen in the middle of the plates. They happen just on the edges, the cracks between the plates. Go answer your questions on the form.